Welcome back to the morning show. I'm Biola Alabi. Pick it up where we left off before my break with my esteemed guest. We were discussing the whole economy, post-recession, and we're going to actually go into another element. But before then, I wanted to say, if people are listening to this and watching this, and the everyday man is now sort of saying, okay, we're post-recession, that means everything is going to be good for me. How do you want to taper their excitement about being post-recession? And I'm going to ask each of you to just say a couple of things to the average man at home, saying, take it, start spending or what?
Keep your belt tightened. Absolutely keep your belt tightened. This is, we're technically out of recession. Okay. So we need to be very clear.
It's a very technical
So with this, you can't really describe this as growth, in economic growth in the real sense of it. It's fantastic news in the sense that you're not heading downwards, but don't confuse it with thinking, oh, happy days are here again. Not by a long shot. Because even, we spoke about spending and reflation. It takes time to spend money as well. It takes time to recruit people and put money in their pockets and so on and so forth. So that we shouldn't be under any illusion about that. So that should take a bit of time. Again, sorry, I really just think it's critical to emphasize this point we spoke about just before the break.
Yes.
I do think this is where politics and sort of management of the economy sort of like conflict. I do think part of the problem in terms of fixing this execution gap, because we didn't quite prefer solutions, part of is managing the politics around it.
Yes.
I think part of what the government has suffered from is just this ability to manage sort of the political aspects of driving its policies, which are fantastic on its own. Like technically they are sound, but that the political skills required to actually get things through, because it's sort of like you pick up informally, even something like the renovation of the Abuja airport. While the technical aspect was managed brilliantly, the politics leading to it was actually quite a bit of a challenge. It took a while to actually get it to a stage where it was sort of approved to go ahead. And things like that, they need to get on top of it, because this is the soft skills that's required to actually be effective in this kind of environment. And it becomes more critical in a politically charged environment like Nigeria, and you need to get on top of that. Yeah.
I would just say that I don't think the ordinary man, really, quite frankly, or the ordinary person, in fact, all the comment has been to almost throw the concept of Nigeria being out of recession away and say, what difference is that going to make to me? So I don't think anybody is cracking open any champagne
wallets,
or
no.
What's important is to say that on the 4th of September, you announced the GDP numbers. On the 15th of September, you announced the inflation numbers, which came down marginally. And then the unemployment data is going to come out in another 2 weeks. I can bet you that the unemployment data is going to show a negative movement, right? Which is the main thing, because it is inflation plus unemployment that gives you the misery index. The misery index in Nigeria is 50.3 right now, which is almost equivalent to what they call the Gini coefficient, which is the level of income inequality. That is a dangerous thing, that the data looks good or moving in the right direction, but the impact is actually moving in the wrong direction. And you find that the income per capita for Nigerians is actually declining because of that population divergence from GDP growth. So you need to do something dramatic. It's not just enough to say there's a stimulus and there's a policy. It has to be dramatic, because if you take the budget of 2017 compared to the budget of 2016, in Naira terms, it went up by 26%. But in dollar terms, because there was a 45% devaluation of the currency, it actually declined. So there was a decline in the dollar spending in an economy which was in recession. What you needed to do is to have been bold enough to say we will spend 9 trillion, right? Which will make up for the devaluation effect. And then you now say, how am I going to fund that deficit, which will not make it negative, right? So you now look for the most efficient ways to fund it properly, which is the thing. The ministers and the policymakers and the president are well-intentioned, but it is that scale, that courage, that overcoming the fear of failure, right, which is the big issue. And time is not on anybody's side. Now we're going to an election, so you're trying to do everything in a stampede manner. And the chances are that if you do it in a stampede, things may go wrong. But it's better to have a wrong outcome than to have no outcome.
Sure.
So that's where we are.
So one of the things that you say is courage, and I think that sort of leads us for a good discussion. The issue of population growth in Nigeria. I continue to, I mean, personally, I don't know if maybe I'm not listening and reading the right newspapers, continues not to be addressed in comparison to other parts of the world where they're actively addressing the issue of population growth.
Yes.
What do we, I mean, and the word courage comes to mind because I feel that there's a courage lacking in addressing this issue. What do you think? Let me start with you.
I think that we hide it behind all these slogans about Africans love their children, we're not counting the number of our children, and so on and so forth. I was at a naming ceremony yesterday, and one of the prayers was that you should not be able to count the number of your children. Hey. And I think that it is a dereliction of duty, to be frank, on the part of government, because there are areas where you need to set the pace. You need to set the example. The former president did recently speak about it, and President Obasanjo did talk about the issue of population growth. But I think that the social reality of what it means in people's lives is not really being brought home to. And, you know, I think when we have ministries of information and they're not, you know, National Orientation Agency and all these bodies, I think that, not to talk of Planned Parenthood Federation, I think that those are gaps that they're just seen as you can put somebody there and leave them to get on with it without really, and that when necessary, if anybody criticizes you, the best thing you can do is to come out with a mouthful of abuse in one way or the restrained or unrestrained. And that's really what is, that's the only way of answering it. And I think that's a big shame, for not just because of the population issue, but for all the other issues that we face in the country.
It brings along. So, Kamar, I'm going to ask you, in the year 2050, Nigeria is projected to be the third most populous country in the world. So there will be India, China, and Nigeria. Once again, I continue to feel that, from a financial and economic perspective, I'm not sure that people are contextualizing what that would mean, how many jobs we would have to create, what type of economy we would need, what type of growth we would need. I know this is off topic, but it almost feels like it kind of always is off topic. From an economic perspective and financial, what are the things we need to do now to even be able to address that issue?
So I think it's a brilliant issue to face and attempt to challenge, to address. Look, it's highly unlikely that we'll be able to alter that trajectory.
Wow.
Let's be clear.
So at this point we're in.
Look, it's highly, highly unlikely. The most brilliant, sustained campaign against population growth today, I don't think, on the trajectory we're on, the birth rate, it's a relatively healthy population. It's a relatively aspirational population. So most likely, you know, we will not alter the trajectory significantly. Therefore, I think what any serious government ought to focus on today. Yes, I do think we should address indiscriminate, population growth and what have you, but it's absolutely critical to figure out how to turn this population growth to your advantage. You understand? Because, it implies a large market, a domestic market, which is always a source of advantage. Think about all the, there's almost a direct 100% correlation, Bismarck, you can, correct me if I'm wrong, between the size of the population and the economy. It's not by coincidence that the largest economies tend to be also the most populous in any particular region. So the key is, how do you figure out how to turn this to your advantage? A couple of things that you need to address. Clearly, there's the issue of, the quality of the human capital. If you have poor quality human capital, that's when you end up with issues of extremism. Again, there's a direct correlation. The poorest countries tend to be where you have extremism, and so on and so forth. So you need to figure out how to improve the quality of human capital, essentially addressing issues of education, healthcare, and nutrition. Those are three fundamentals. You need to address that. You need to manage the issue of cohesiveness, internal cohesiveness as a country, and then I'm sure we're going to talk about the whole, all the agitations going on around, because you do need, a bit of stability and internal stability in order to be able to have that market, that domestic market functioning effectively. And then ultimately there's sort of just like creating that unified vision that drives things forward. But I think the first 2 points are the most critical ones. If you have a large population and there's nothing you can do about it, better make sure that it's a high-quality population.
Sure.
Okay? And, and better make sure that it's internally cohesive so that you can have stable domestic markets which will consume. And guess what? It will turn into an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage for you.
I have to turn to the economist on this, on this issue.
The data shows very clearly that while in 2017 we go into positive growth, 0.8, all the way to 2021 at 3.1%, labor productivity growth remains negative all the way from 2015 all the way to 2021.
Wow.
So productivity, which is a function of education and technology, is negative, while the growth of capital stock itself grows up as much as 5% growth of GDP. It means that you have a more or less skillless population, and you have a population where you have brought them down to 30% score. So both the quality, quantity, and the stock of the people, right? Yes. So it's you have an education crisis, you have a productivity crisis.
So what, I mean, just because you're the economist on the panel, I really want to ask you, we've seen China, we've seen what China can do. People are sitting at home saying, if we're going to be as big as China one day, what do we need to do to grow?
No, first and foremost, you have to accept China and India and Korea and Vietnam have done something that they had an education problem and it's fixed that. Yes. That's the starting point. You cannot say you want to fix that just because you're throwing, like I said, talk is cheap. Talking about India, China. Can you afford to do that which China has done? Can you afford to do that which Indonesia has done? Can you afford to do that? So, and that's why the data is very clear that your labor productivity growth at minus 4.3 in 2016, while your economy was minus 1.9, shows the gap. That, and it tells you also that if everybody in Nigeria was to die, the economy on its own would have grown, right? So it is not, you know, but that's what it is, because that's what it is. Now, but it's your people that drive your economy, not the oil. Because when we talk about the economy, we talk about, when there's oil and when there's gas. How many people in this country are involved in production of oil and gas? Less than 1% of the population, right? Therefore, 99% of the population are waiting to benefit from that. Now, how do we get this 99% of the population to be productive? How do we get them to be competitive? Because we're in a competitive world, right? That is where the real problem is. So, first of all, we understand the problem, and the politicians and policymakers now have to know that to take these people along, to educate them, right? To make them not certificates, I'm talking making them functional. That is the key issue, and therefore they can be productive. That is.
So, I mean, we're going to wrap up soon on the segment, but one of the things I just want to touch on is education. When you say education in Nigeria, unfortunately, the first thing people think of is formal education. We're not developing technical, we're not developing apprenticeship, vocational education. Why have we made that such a swing to only formal education, and really in light of it have just ignored vocational?
To me, I date it back to the advent of military rule, because suddenly it was as if the military attitude was that, well, if it's just certificates, then let them, we can do certificates, we can do. And what is behind that certificate, even for formal education, became a matter of, well, as long as you can produce the certificate. And that's why you find employers at every level, they get people, they produce the certificates quite all right, but every employer knows that you still have to put the applicant through their paces about what can you actually do. And in today's world, we are still educating people for the last century. Our courses, I mean, even I, as a legal practitioner, I know the things that I do. I know I have to type. I have to do all sorts of things. There are things that I have to be able to do. That and yet, in many of our schools, they say, we are going to learn computer, and it's like a sort of just a word that you use, and then everybody crowds round and looks at it. Now, this is an area where I have to say, and I'm speaking as a trustee of the ZODBA's Memorial Libraries, where well-meaning individuals can help and can put in the kind of things. Because we also know that this same Nigeria that is educating people for the last century It's creating a, I don't even know what to call it, that's how out of date I am. But, you know, this media hub, this hub at Yaba that is, that
digital,
brought
like, the tech hub.
We are creating it. And most of those people, it's almost as if some universities do offer, you know, courses in computing. It shouldn't be, you shouldn't have to wait till you get to university. In other places, they're talking about, they need to teach coding in primary school.
Yes,
and so we really need to look at the way we're educating.
Sure.
And, you know, just as people want their children to learn about their religion, you know, the churches and other people come in and, you know, offer extracurricular.
Yes.
We need to have ways in which, even if you are not getting it in school, you should be able to get it from whether it's MTN is offering some school after thing, or
some digital. I mean, we have to think of multiple ways of educating our population. Yeah. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to. I mean, I think this leads us amazing into politics. So we're going on a short break. Please stay with us.